Nico. Can you hear us properly from home? Okay. Okay. Okay, let's get started. Welcome everybody. For the people who have never been to one of our service design meets, this is a meetup that we organize here in our office at Oblo, and the idea is to discuss vertical topics of interest at the intersection with service design. So every time we focus on a different topic and thinking of the way in which we as service designer work with the organizations and what we could learn from the organizations on the other side. This time we decided to talk about service design and the topic of the diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is something that we hear more and more of in all the conversations, also inside the service design community, but also outside. It's a topic that we care a lot about in general in our agency. Obviously, we are a small team, and when you are a small team, it's easier in a way because we feel that we have a lot of alignments in terms of values and in general the fact of being mixed in terms of gender, international culture is something that we always try to keep up with. Actually, a funny story about us is that sometimes we are criticized for being the majority of us is we are a female-led agency, and so the majority of us we are women, and people notice that. So I think that's already an insight, that people when interact with us want to maybe point out this aspect, but also we never feel the same way because a lot of time the clients we work with, especially when we work on digital products and tech-based products, are on the opposite side, completely unbalanced, and we feel that we are the ones bringing balance to that discussion. So at the end, we never have that perception when we are among us. Starting from our experience, we thought let's try to understand what happens when the scale is bigger of the organizations, and there are obviously many more challenges than the ones that we can face in our society. So we invited Irene Ponti, who is a senior service designer at Logotel, and Silvia Fontana, who is an HR manager and leading, and then you will share with us more, leading also transformation related to these topics inside Medici Senza Frontiere. We also had invited earlier Caterina Lorenzi from Yes Milano and Milano and Partners. She had a health issue today, so she cannot be with us, but we will still share some experiences of working with them maybe later. Mm-hmm. So I will start asking some questions, starting from you, Irene. So I know that in your work at Logotel, you have been supporting an association called Valore D in implementing a project that is called Unicity to support organizations basically becoming more inclusive. So I think the first question is if you could explain us more about Valore D and the Unicity project.
Of course. So let's start from Valore D. Valore D is the first business association in Italy that gathers more than 350 companies related to different sectors, and they are an association focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. They started as a gender balance association, but now they are focused on a lot of things. And they gather, as I was saying, more than 350 companies from companies which employ 50 people to companies which employ more than 50,000 people. And they gather together more than 2 million people potentially, okay? So their focus is to bring diversity, equity, and inclusion topics among the companies that are associated to the company. So their focus is training related to D&I topics, sharing best practices, creating events that could create networking between companies and create culture related to D&I, and also research, because they have a sector inside the association which focuses on research. So we at Logotel, which is an independent design company I work for, together with Valore D, have developed Unicity, as Roberta was saying, which is a digital service platforms that puts together all the offering of Valore D and enables the people that work for the associated company in using all the services and all the solutions offered by Valore D. It is a multi-level access platform. What do I mean by that? It means that depending on your role inside the company you work for, you have different kind of possibilities and services to be used inside the community. So for example, if you are an HR manager or if you are a diversity, equity, and inclusion manager inside your company, you will be targeted as a core user, whereas if you are a person which works in another area, you are considered a standard user. Consider that standard users may be employees which may be part, for example, of a production chain, or also stores or offices. So really different kind of people who do a different kind of work every day. So if you are a standard user, you can enter the platform and first of all access a learning level. So you may explore e-learnings or participate to online training sessions dedicated to everybody who wants to participate. You also have a news and editorial section where you can keep up to date related to D&I topics. And I will tell you later more that how we manage this part, because we have an editorial staff that manages the community every day. You have the possibility to know the events that are led by Valore D related to D&I, but also by the companies that are associated to Valore D and want to spread their event related to the D&I inside the Unicity platform. If you are a core user, so if you are an HR manager or a D&I manager, in addition to all the services I told you before, you have the possibility to access best practices and so to read best practices of other companies, of course, related to D&I, and so to gather inspiration related to some things you may concretize inside your company. And you have also the possibility to access the non-financial reporting. So you may export some data that may be useful for the, as I was saying, the report. So depending on the person you are and the role you have inside your company, you may access different kind of solutions and of services. So the goal for Valore D was, first of all, a challenge of putting everything together in one digital platform, all the offering they have, and gather and aggregate all the services just through this platform. Because before they had a lot of digital touch points to work with. And the other goal is to create more proximity between the associated companies and the association, and also between the associated companies, because the companies may want to get in contact with the other people with the same role inside their the other companies. So we say that this is a community of communities. If you consider a company as a community, usually our communities are focused on just one company, whereas this service was challenging for us because it has led and put together different communities belonging to different companies, all in one community, which is Unicity. And for us as Logotel, the main challenge is to accompany Valore D not only in the strategy, in the design, the prototyping, testing, and developing phase, but also after the launch. So for us, it's really important to stay side by side to the customer. In fact, as I was saying before, we have an editorial staff because for us it is really important to see how people interact with the service we launched and to see how needs may evolve in time and how people use the platform to help the customer, our customer in Valore D, update the service in order to keep it interesting for the people who use it.
Understood. So basically, actually, this is something I didn't know about the project before. So Unicity is one for everyone, everybody, all the employees of the different companies associated, and it's basically a way to talk about diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, and to expand the culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion in all the people that belong to different companies.
And more specifically, thinking of the last part you were saying, we want to accompany them also after the launch. What are in your experience so far the enabling factor or the blockers that could, let's say, support or on the other side become an obstacle when an organization tries to adopt that platform?
So we link to something you said just a few minutes ago. About the fact that Unicity is one platform, one service that is related to all the companies. So all the companies access the same platform, okay? So at the beginning, this may have been challenging for us, okay? Because some companies were thinking, first of all, about the fact that inside the same platform, there were their competitors. Okay, so my employees enter in contact with with our competitors, and also another challenge we faced during the design phase and the strategy phase was that for some companies, the fact that their employees have the possibility to access a platform and express themselves in a free way may have been worrying, okay? Because you never know what a person may write inside a digital platform. Of course, what you write is related to your name and your name is related to your company, but this has been like a challenge for us. How have we solved it? Through saying that we have an editorial staff, not only saying, of course, but also doing it every day. We have an editorial staff that accompanies Valore D in the Unicity life, okay? So we do activities of community management, and every day our editorial staff checks if somebody has written something that may be challenging for the community, so for Unicity, or maybe for the company. And also the editorial staff develops contents, okay, every day to keep the community live. So this first factor was challenging at the beginning, and then we faced it in that way.
Do you have any, I don't know, example of what people were maybe this aspect of checking what people are talking about and maybe finding a way to handle it better?
You mean like the comments that people put inside the community? Actually, they participate in a positive way. So a lot of people write comments about the fact that it's really interesting, or maybe something related to a specific content. We also do some kind of contest inside the company. For example, Valore D has just done an event which was limited to some specific people inside the companies, for example, CEOs or so on. But we said inside the community that there were like from 5 to 10 free seats if, of course, people would have done some specific actions that we have asked for, and like in 15 minutes, all the places were taken. So people really participate to this kind of activities. Also, because as you were saying before, the diversity, equity, and inclusion topic is a topic which now is really important and interesting inside the companies. Like, it's a hot topic at the moment.
I imagine that also for people who are working as a D&I manager or HR manager, it's there is already motivation in going to the platform and checking best practices or getting ideas and inspirations. Maybe for other people, you need a trigger in to go and learn and feel motivated about it.
Yeah, and also another thing we have to keep in mind, which evolves with the project, is that not all the companies, not all the employees have the same time to dedicate to this topic, okay? So the service must be designed in a flexible way so that if you have more time, you have a lot of activities to do inside it. But if you have less time, or if you are enabled from your company to have less time, because D&I is a topic, but then you have a lot of other topics to learn on and to be trained on. The community must offer like also like short contents and short paths for people who has less time.
Yeah, maybe also more actionable, I imagine, insights. And so how is it to work on such a project as a service designer? Like, what are the challenges? And also, I imagine maybe, I don't know, bias we have that you encountered.
Starting from the challenges and as a mindset, I would say, it is really important to be flexible, okay? Because you every day in every phase of the project you face different challenges, and in this kind of project where you do the analysis and the strategy phase, and then the design phase, and then the prototyping and test phase, but it's never linear. So even if you are in the test phase, you must be ready to get back and start the design again, because maybe some companies, since they are like more than 350, take some information that may change the point of view on the service. So the challenge has been to really be flexible and ready to readapt the service, and to be ready to change it also after the launch, because as you launch a service, then you have to see how people interact with it, and maybe during the usage of the service, you discover that there is something you haven't. It's not that you have never thought about it because you have lacked something in the process, but maybe a new need emerges or a need evolves, and then you have to be ready to change the service, some part of the service, or maybe also the entire mission. It doesn't mean that the design was not efficient or was a failure. It means that services evolve with people, and this is a time in which we change every day the way in which we do things, and so we as designers have the challenge to be flexible and to be ready to change every day.
Did you have to change? What did you have to change?
Let's say that we started on, I would say, October, more or less, 2022. And we launched it on November 2023. And we faced some moments even during summer. Okay, so you think, okay, in summer you are developing it, you will be ready to launch it, and so everything is written on the stone, and you will never change anything. But we faced some challenges, and then related to, for example, cybersecurity requests that have been done by the companies. So we had to imagine different scenarios of adoption of the community by different kind of companies, and we had to adapt our cybersecurity. How do you say cybersecurity
policies?
Yeah.
So infrastructure.
Infrastructure, yeah. So, for example, we during summer developed different possibilities for companies to access the platform, because some companies wanted a passwordless access, and this was developed and discovered. So it doesn't mean that we didn't explore this space before. We have explored it, but then the requests evolved, and then we identified different scenarios, and then after the launch we discovered that everything was going good. Okay. But during summer we must have been ready to different kind of possibility of usage from different kind of companies.
Okay.
And related to the bias, I would say something that we are all used to, but for me it's really important, which is the virtualization. I mean, if we develop a DNI service, it is important not to virtualize people with different kind of needs and with different kind of characteristics in all the process, not only in the strategy and analysis phase, but also in the design phase, in the prototyping, in the testing phase, and so to really involve different kind of people that may bring different point of views on the design of the service.
So you mean that you're not taking for granted that we know already their perspectives, but really involving them in the design.
Yeah, in the design we involve them, different kind of people with different needs, also in the testing phase, to understand if we were really inclusive from different point of views, from an accessibility point of view, from a language point of view, from the use of the images we were doing, so really different kind of aspects.
I imagine that's tough.
It's challenging, I guess. So for our next part of the speak, we wanted to go a bit more in depth of the organization, and switching also to another context. So from switching from profit going to no profit, and so we involved Silvia from Medici Senza Frontiere, which just maybe a bit of an introduction, is a non-governmental institution that brings support and medical head where there are conflict or in general epidemics. And Silvia is in charge of organization, labor relation, and HR more in general. And I think one of the interesting aspects of Doctors Without Borders is that it's both a national organization, so there's different chapters and local organization that operate both from an humanitarian level, but also from more structured, which is the case of the Italian chapter. But also there's an international coordination, so there's a strong identity and ethical conduct that must be, let's say, respected from an international point of view. So since Silvia is in charge a bit with her team about bringing this and developing this culture of diversity, equity, inclusion, we wanted to ask you a bit what does it mean to talk about this topic in Medici Senza Frontiere, both from a local and international point of view?
Sure. So I was thinking about the translation, I would say, of DNI within a humanitarian context. And I really believe that there's an important link at values base on D&I, diversity, equity, inclusion, and our humanitarian mandate, which is basically taking care of people. From a D&I perspective, this means taking care about people at humanitarian level, or even, as you rightly mentioned, at organizational level, considering how people feel and how people can empower themselves within the organization. So that is the translation, I would say, of the D&I perspective and the D&I journey within such an organization. And if I think about how we started this journey, because it is a journey, we have to think about D&I as a multi-year perspective, right? I would say that at movement level, we really started an important discussion after the killing of George Floyd, so say 2020, and at movement level, and each then of the partner section and also the operational center really started a discussion over discrimination and racism also, both at organizational level and in terms of our humanitarian projects and initiative, the way we design our intervention, right? And from that, then we developed many different projects, again, at international level and at local level. And we did it, that's something I would like to highlight, with an integrated approach and a multi-level approach. The multi-level approach meant that we created, we call it D&I, or actually it's EDI, because for us equity, it's like
The strongest.
the strongest one, but I will try to.
It's fine.
No, it's-
I call it like.
No, we can keep. It's also nice to hear about like
Yeah,
how
but
these things are like
there's been a
flipped.
discussion also on that, right? But anyway, so we created a working group at movement level with the aim of create a community of practice, I would say, with all the focal point of each partner section and each operational centers. We are more or less 30-35 people to create a sort of coordination among them, each initiative that are deployed and implemented at local level. And then at MSF Italy level, which where I work currently, we have first created a EDI working group composed. This is an important point I would like to highlight, not only by HR. I mean, it's by chance that now I'm working as a HR, I would say that. But it was like a people coming from all the departments in order to, as you rightly said, bring different perspective. D&I is not just a matter of HR, D&I is an organizational matter, right? And
Yeah. And you were mentioning before that, yeah, it has been a journey, I imagine, like from kind of like 2020. I don't know if you want to share with us a bit some stories of how was to implement this culture in the organization, some success or failure stories. I don't know what's the status of the fact.
I would like to bring you some very concrete examples at international level and also at the Italian level, I would say, and then I would go also to
Yes.
because along the way, many lessons learned. Because when it comes to D&I is about an individual and then an organizational change, right? And when you deal with people, a lot can happen along the way. And to be concrete, for example, at movement level, we define, thanks to a strong commitment of our management team, key initiative to deepen. The first one was the topic on racism, and then we created a specific project at international level, which is called Anti-Racism Peak Project. The main goal of this is to create a I would say, awareness over anti-racism practices, a community of practice on that specific topic in order to increase our understanding on how to avoid potential racist behavior within the organization, right? And also in terms of assistance for medical care to our patients. The second project, which was quite important for us, was to understand better how, as an organization, we could be more inclusive in terms of access to medical, to healthcare, and also at organizational level for people with disabilities. So at international level, we have this type of project, and we are linked to there's a coordination for that. And then the third one was the project, which is called LGBTQI plus inclusion project. And again, here the objectives are twofold. The first one is to start creating more awareness on the inclusion of the LGBTQI community, both at organizational level and also in terms of medical care, because as you might know, in many countries where MSF, Doctors Without Borders, operates, unfortunately, there is no the guarantee of access to medical care for specific and for discriminated communities, such as the LGBTQ+. So those are the projects at the international level. At MSF Italy level, what we did was create this EDI.
No, it's good.
Working group. We create a roadmap thanks to a moment of reflection. We did a diagnostic, a DNI diagnostic. With a mixed methodology survey and also focus group. We learn a lot from that in order to define the priorities with a DNI perspective, and we define 7 dimensions of intervention according to what we learn from our people. And now we are in the second year of the implementation of this roadmap. And just to give you like a snapshot of the very specific initiative we developed according to each dimension. For example, in 2021, we built up the Ethical Behavioral Committee in case of complaint for discrimination or abuses, which is, this is quite an interesting point, an independent body. It's not an executive, it's not into the executive part of MSF Italy. This is an example. The other example could be we created a learning process, and a learning for us it's quite important because it refers to our bias, conscious or unconscious, on the different of the different level and potential discrimination according to race, gender, and so on.
What do you mean by a learning?
A learning because first, in order to start a discussion to change at organizational level on DNI, you first have to be aware of what are your individual level, what are your bias. And that's why we thought that it was important to highlight the unlearning part. Because when you grow up, you because of the society and your background, bias may occur to you, and so you are really to debunk those type of bias in order then to start a discussion on how to improve as a community, and then as an organization.
And sorry, maybe I interrupted you, and you were mentioning then. There was another project that you started.
Another one that maybe I could highlight. The most recent one was the Inclusive Leadership Program.
Okay.
Which is quite important when you start the implementation of a DNI strategy. We learned that in the sense that the most important thing is to have a true, real commitment from the leadership at different level of the organization in order then for them to represent the DNI, be DNI ambassadors, and then to create a sort of community and then build up or rebuild the community.
And how did the people react to these initiatives over the year?
Yeah, it was a journey where we learned a lot. For example, we learned that it was quite important. Actually, I would say it's critical how you speak and communicate your DNI ideas and projects. For example, when we started the unlearning process, which we could say was referring mainly to the learning and development dimension of the DNI, our mistake was to say, this is a compulsory training for everybody at MSF, for the staff that actually represented for the people already with individual difficulties to embrace the DNI journey, a complete a blocker. And now we learned, and so we learned that the communication has to be not at all normative, not at all you have to do that, you don't have to do that, and but more on a collaborative process, on a discussion. That is what we learned, and indeed, what we have done is that it's interesting what you were saying about the evolution and that adaptability, because actually it's exactly what happened in MSF Italy. We started with an EDI working group, but then we realized that the EDI working group composed of 10, 15, 20 people didn't have like a clear mandate apart from the first part where we were 7, 8. And then therefore we developed more on the governance side because the EDI journey changed. And nowadays we have a smaller group of people taking care of the content part and also on the coordination of the implementation part. And I am part of this, we call that now EDI advisory group. But this is because we learned along the way that at a certain point the working group was not anymore the right structure to continue our journey.
Yeah. Before you were mentioning communication and how it was important also to adapt a bit to the language, and I think also as Oblo through the years, we also see how you were adapting a bit a piece of communication and also how it was impacting on our work and like which kind of picture to choose or like the font or illustration. How did also like the organization more internally had to adapt to the spoken and written language in this sense, and generally how people reacted to this shift in communication?
Well, it's an ongoing process. And by the way, the communication was, according to the diagnostic we did, one of the main and most important, I would say, area of intervention over the DNI perspective. And we define the so-called external communication and internal communication. Okay. Internal, how we collaborate, right? And external, how the content creator in fundraising, in communication, in awareness campaign, transmit the messages of MSF. And what we did, and we are still in the process, was to at least work with a collaborative approach to the creation of guidelines, not regulation on how to, but guidelines, kind of reference. At the global level, we have algorithms, so then we can share the concrete example. A guideline, MSF Global DNI guide for communication and fundraising content, in order to give some sort of direction, I would call it like this, direction for the external communication. Right now, On Monday, actually, we will present the contextualization of the DNI Global Guideline on Fundraising and Communication at Italian level. We create a guideline for the Italian for the Italian context, and what we really understood was that it was important for the content creator to discuss that guideline. So on Monday, we will have a workshop to discuss in a certain way, let them enable to put in place that guideline.
The guidelines.
Yeah, and on the internal communication, there was kind of a challenge in the sense that we worked a lot in how people collaborate and how people communicate, and we focus our attention on the so-called inclusive communication. And we decided to start a partnership with Parole Ostili. And we signed their manifesto against Parole Ostili, in a sense. And from that, we organized 3, 4, 5 moments of discussion over key elements of potential discrimination in the language.
Which is really practical, and I imagine like what to do and not to do when talking to people.
And always then highlighting it's a journey, there's no the right or wrong, it's the society that evolves, and according to the society we change.
Yeah. And finishing up on what to do and not to do, have you noticed any other kind of like best practices when implementing these kind of strategies? I think we've talked a lot also about how to adapt governance, how to adopt languages. I don't know if you have any other suggestion for also like maybe for us as designer, like what we could take into account when doing this kind of project.
Yeah, I learned a lot about how to be effective in starting a honest conversation over some very challenging, again from an individual perspective, topic. For example, at Italian level, it's very much easier to speak about. I'm going to be very practical.
Yes.
Disability, for example. I'm thinking about the different potential discrimination drivers of so-called discrimination on DNI. It's easy because it's something that at individual level you can live, right? On average, I would say. But when it comes in Italy, for example, you have to speak about religion, and then about LGBTQ plus. You have really to think about how to structure the discussion, and you have to be prepared also to we call it strong facilitation, because fight can happen. In our case, in a workshop with an external speaker, it was on inclusive communication, and at a certain point the speaker said, well, with a very paternalistic, that's how people perceive that, paternalistic approach. I was like you 10 years ago. And this is something that to be avoided. So it was to do a sort of after action review, giving very contextualized feedback to the speakers in order to accompany them also in the discussion with the people which have different background. But this is something quite important, and I would add as another thing I learned is that in order to start a honest conversation, it is easier for the staff, for people, if you start speaking about yourself, your individual experience. It's it's a strategy to create, to building bridge. That's something, and I tell it to all the speakers, dealing with D&I, this strategy.
I guess it's also feel less judging in a way.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you so much. It was really useful, I guess. We wanted to give you a last perspective from more from a city perspective, so also from like a municipality. We invited Caterina Laurenzi, which couldn't come here like lately for health issues, as we were saying, but we have done a recent project with them, with Milano and Partners and their brand, which is Yes Milano. For basically creating guidelines and good practices for companies and organizations to welcome international talents, more generally professional students, business owner, with the goal, I mean, their goal as an organization is the one to create a more diverse landscape in the city, and also to bring value, like not just from an economical perspective, but also in terms of positioning and how people actually leave the city and create, let's say, another level of inclusion. So I will interview Robbie in a this really natural this really natural way. So yes, we started this project with Yes Milano, and in, let's say, in creating these guidelines and also like supporting a company and organization, understanding how to welcome international talent, what we learned and what we can share as key takeaway in talking about this kind of inclusion, which is basically creating like more like integration between different cultures and way of living in the cities.
Yeah. No, it was interesting to interview people coming from different contexts and coming to Milan to work because actually it's like looking at the ecosystem where we live in from a different perspective. What we discovered is basically that a lot of organizations are not prepared to have a mixed team inside the company, but starting from very basic and simple aspects that are even not related to the most, let's say, philosophical elements. For example, we have been hearing from people who have been hired from multinational companies, and then when they arrived, there was nobody inside the organizations who were able to explain them how to take their fiscal code, for example. Very, very essential things. And it was fun because they were saying, if you ask an Italian person, how do I get my fiscal code? Italians don't know because you have to buy exactly. So also finding maybe not a lot of help from the colleagues, and in general trying to find their ways around. Something that a lot of professionals do if they see that the organization is lacking support, they go and check university website and university materials, because university are speaking to international crowds a bit more. So that was an interesting opportunity for us to help Yes Milano, being part of Camera di Commercio, to think of themselves more as a facilitator of that change. And also we learned that even small things like this one or others could make a difference. So people were saying, I feel welcome to an event, not necessarily because the speakers are speaking in English, but maybe it's enough to have the captions in English. So even if you are running presentation inside your company, that's something to pay attention to. So a lot of very small elements that then could make a difference in between, okay, I'm not welcome here, and to feel welcomed. Yeah, and what else we learned?
I think also like going a bit back to one of your first point, we also saw how the community, it's also going back to the first intervention, the community in this case was really helpful for them. So if they didn't find the support in their point of contact in the company, then obviously the first point was like going back to their international community, so, and asking support in that sense, and finding help in someone who have lived the same experience. But the downside on that they will always stay in a close bubble and close community. So in this sense, like one of our idea, and also what we discussed with Yes Milano, is to basically how to break this bubble and just in some sense like think international and think what could be the problems and the blockers of international people without being biased of saying, yeah, we know that Codice Fiscale it's there and we don't know what to do. But in the other sense, like act local and find a way to integrate people and international in the life of the city and not pretend to say, okay, let's do an English aperitivo and that's it, because then like that will not be the way us as Italian will leave the city, and generally also like international wouldn't say, I would not go to an international aperitivo just for the sake of it, but I would go to let's say an aperitivo for people that are in my same area of interest. So if they talk tech and innovation, I would be interested to go if I can access to it. So if it's English, if I know where it is and I know where are the information about that.
So the point where we arrived with Yes Milano in this case specifically is to try to understand how they could provide specific tools or checklists, guidelines, but in general like platforms in a way for the organizations to learn, okay, if somebody comes from abroad, I can point them to this resource, or if I want to be more inclusive, these are the things that I could do straight away in a way to be more welcoming. And then I think one of our biggest learning was similar to what you're saying, Silvia, now, is that Italy and Milano, but also we can generalize, is perceived from people coming from abroad not really as an inclusive place, especially when it comes to LGBTQ plus rights and also cultural in general, no? And this was something also hard to listen to in a way, because you feel part of the issue in a way. And but what we learned on the positive side is that a lot of the people we talked to recognize that Italy and Milan are super pet friendly. So there were a lot of people who were saying, I moved here with the family. There was a person we have in mind specifically from Brazil. She lived in the US and then she is now living in Milan with the family, and the husband is in Paris. So she was like, no, but I'm not going to Paris because here at least my dog has a very wonderful life. So that's also something that we have never really thought about, but changing perspective, we also learned this thing.
Yeah, I think something related to what you were saying, that sometimes we were feeling like being the problem. I think in this sense, like service design method were really useful to also like just take a bit of distance from it, and also have not a neutral eye in the sense of not acknowledging all the diversity and all the different like problem, but more be sure that we were covering like all the different step of the process and like all the different aspects that a person could let's say face of a procedure that a person could face when arriving in a new city. So in that sense, it was really important for us on be sure to follow like in methods and generally like avoid being biases in not involving like all the different kind of people, but also like be sure to have like a good mix when of like a recruiting, like for recruiting when doing research. So I guess like in that sense, tools of service design were really useful to take a bit of a step back and be more like a listener and a facilitator of conversation, as Silvia was mentioning before.
Yeah, collaboration seems to be a word that occurred a lot together with flexibility. In that case, specifically when we were deciding who to interview, we tried not just to look at different, obviously, countries of origins, but also economic conditions, expectations that you have in the moment in which you get here, and then obviously also being closer, let's say, to a European culture versus more far apart. I don't know if I think this could be also an interesting point also for you, Irene, if you felt the need to adapt any of the tools or the methods you normally use specifically for the Unicity project.
Maybe I would not say methods and tools, but more about an approach. So as I was saying before, maybe we are more used to, let's say, linearity and about thinking about the fact that when you launch a service, then it's like it's launched, but we must think about a reiterative process and way of working, because as also Silvia was saying, you develop a solution and then maybe you realize that you must change at some point, and so be ready to evolve together with the service and together with the customer. So I would not say about methods because we use like the service design tools and methods we are used to, but much more about the fact that we must have been ready to change and to adapt during all the phases of the project.
To follow the context in a way.
I don't know if any of you has some question or just intervention.
Maybe I have a question. Thank you very much for your intervention. What I understood from your different perspective is that DNI is a learning path through the, let's say, differences existing, the diversity existing, and the plurality in some way. And I was wondering if, for example, exist some cultures different from our culture that are in a learning path, let's say, advanced compared to us, and there is some cases, some example we can learn from, particularly in the international field, let's say. It's a general question for all of you.
I will just say that Unicity is mainly an Italian based service because already is a non-profit association that works in Italy. So the main focus is the Italian market. So maybe the question is more for the others.
And from my perspective, I would say that every country, the response is that no, because it's at the point of depart. So every country and every culture has a different start according to the background, which is political, economical, and social. And overall, we are all part of a system which is relative. If I think, for example, I was thinking about this question, and on another type of discussion, think about peace. It's the same line of how you define a peaceful or not peaceful society. Yes, of course, if you think about conflict, okay. But I mean, each society can improve, starting from the situation is now, looking forward. And in my personal opinion, we should say the same also for DNI. And to me, it's quite difficult from a sociological point of view or even a human rights perspective, say that one country is better or advanced in the journey greater than the other. I mean, it's like more of a philosophical perspective, maybe mine, but that's what I think. I don't know if I responded to you, but
I would like to ask, also considering international projects, how did you manage language and sense? Like not only because they are different words that need to be translated, but also because meanings are different. So how did you manage this situation?
Well, actually, this is a great question because it allows me to speak about an important enabler, which is the so-called intercultural competence. And also in terms of communication, from a very practical point of view, we can be more effective through the role of, for example, intercultural mediator, which are really very a key actor in the implementation of humanitarian action, especially when it comes to community engagement program. Think about the distribution of medicaments or sharing on good health practice. So we do have intercultural mediators trying to deal with this sort of building bridge in terms of language. And then, if I think about my international colleagues, we developed this type of program on intercultural competencies in order to make them aware of the importance of language and try to find a way to express themselves and to contextualize their intervention. At Italian level, if I may, for just to give you an example, we do have projects for the people on the move, dealing with people in migration, migrants, and in this case, the role of intercultural mediator is critical in order to give them all the information of the Italian healthcare system, just to give you an example.
So if I understood correctly, you have the intercultural mediator role, but also like some kind of awareness around that is for other people that need to work face to face with these.
Yes, exactly. And I would add also that we work a lot with the communities. Well, it depends on the type of medical intervention. If it's vertical or horizontal. Horizontal meaning where the community has to be involved. And in this case, we connect also with community leaders, or we call it, I remember my time in Congo, relais communautaire. So focal point at community level that can translate and contextualize maybe medical practice in the context of intervention.
I was interested into inclusive leadership you talked about. How did you implement it, and through all the process, how did you actually check that it was implemented and practiced by leaders?
Yeah. So we did the first, so it was quite a challenge in the sense that we took really a lot of time to design it because it's, we were really much interested in not only the delivery of the DNI, but on the impact of this type of training, obviously. And what we did was to create a workshop discussion where in the first part of the discussion was really about the individual with all the different type of potential biases. And then in the second part of the discussion was really about the person as a leader of a team or of the organization, in the case of the management team. So we create 3 different workshops with the management team first, because in that case it was also important to have sort of a more strategic buy-in from them. Then with the middle management, and then with the collaborator mixed. And then we did a workshop with everybody with a very specific goal. As an inclusive leader, what are the very practical action and commitment we, as a community of leaders, we want to take in the next 6 to 12 months. And it was an amazing experience, a lot of commitment, list of things, and at the end, if you read then the best practice or the action, I would say that the majority of them are really like kind of common sense, or but it was important as a community to write them down, and each leader it was kind of a signature over it. And yeah, that's how we designed it. And then in 3 and 6 months, in terms of impact, because you asked also on the change attitude and behavior, which is an impact evaluation perspective. We will check over these commitments how go.
Things are going. And talking about impact, I was curious also in your case, how do you measure the impact of the platform and how do you collect data about it?
But since it's a digital platform, we have the possibility to track what people do, what people prefer, and the behaviors of people inside the company, both at a company level, so having the possibility to understand what each and every company does inside the community, and also at a community level, so analyzing it globally. About all the people that enters the community, and also from a core user or standard user level. So we have some objectives, some goals that we have to reach, and we measure it, we track it every day, and then we do like meetings periodically with the customer, with Valority, to analyze the data and to understand what is working and what is not working, and to adapt our activities inside the community to be more efficient and more interesting to people. And of course, we design the goals during the design phase, so before the launch. But goals can be changed over time. So for now, since we launched it on November, these are the goals, but maybe they will change in time after months or years of usage of the solution.
It comes back the flexibility and
of course, and also as Silvio was saying, the impact measurement is really important, because the flexibility allows you to adapt the service depending on the impacts you're reaching with the solution.
Yeah.
I have a question. So, based on your experience, do you think AI might have a role in the future in this kind of activities and AI in general?
It's a good question. I don't know if you have seen some examples of how giving prompts to AI, you had like results that were kind of not strange, but for example, there was an artificial intelligence who just gave as a result images of Black people, because it was trained to be more inclusive. I think that related to these kind of topics, the human factor is fundamental, since we are talking about individuals, about people. So people will play the major role, and we will face a matter of how to, because since we as humans are training artificial intelligence, the risk is that you train artificial intelligence through the biases that you were talking about before. Exactly. So I think this will be a challenge, how to, break this kind of biases that could be conscious or unconscious, and see if we are able to train artificial intelligence in a way that it could really help and not replicate the biases that we are living in the society.
I think something to add is sometimes I've been reading stories about people, I don't know, writing an email and then saying to ChatGPT or that make it more inclusive, no? And I'm wondering, also thinking of all the elements that we discussed as talking about these topics being a learning process where also small commitments could make the difference in the way in which you approach things. So maybe that delegating that aspect to the AI is also, I don't know, maybe not the best thing to do.
Yeah. I guess we can switch to beers and wines. But yeah, thank you everyone, and thank you Silvia, thank you Irene, and ciao.